Hi, Captain Kirk. It's so nice to have you on the show. How are you doing today?
Doing very well, thank you. I get to go to
Beautiful.
Nigeria.
Beautiful. It's so nice to have you here. Okay, Captain Kirk, I am quite excited to have you on the show for some reasons. All right. Firstly, I strictly believe in knowledge seeking because in order to transition from a chaotic situation to that of a beautiful one, it takes the application of knowledge, quality information. So for that reason, I am always interested in expanding my insight. Okay. Now the second reason why I'm excited to have Captain Kirk on the show is because of my audience now, the ones who are going to be listening to our conversation. Because I am convinced that there are some things that Captain Kirk knows that some of my audience needs to hear you say these stuff, directly from your mouth in order for them to experience transformation. I firmly believe that. And lastly, that is me. I trust that I'm definitely going to learn one or two things from your story, your insight, and your experiences. So, for that reason, Captain Kirk, let's get started with your introduction. Talk to us about the journey, how the journey has been so far, how you got here. And afterwards, I've gotten some beautiful questions for you. Okay, Captain Kirk, over to you.
So you'd like to know how I got to where I am now, huh? I was reared in South Dakota. I became an engineer. I spent 2 years with Shell Oil Company. They kept telling me eventually you're going to have to live in Houston, Texas. I had 2 short stints down there, and I did not want to live where it was that humid. So I ended up going back to school and became a teacher. I've been teaching mathematics and civics for the last 40 years. And over the last 5 to 10 years of that, something that going around in my head was I was looking forward to the day when I could teach something that really, really matters. And one thing I think, it doesn't matter what your vocation is in life, freedom and liberty, the ability to express yourself without fear from government, to be able to actually have an understanding of how God has given us, especially in the United States, wonderful opportunities to not only fight for liberty, but also to contend for the faith. The faith that I live by is one that deals with evil. We're commanded by God to love all people, but we're also commanded by God to hate evil. And you can do both. You can hate the evil that people do, and you can love them in such a way as that they'll listen to you. I've had many conversations over the years with people who I didn't agree with, but I learned that by listening, I can win more arguments than by talking. If I appreciate what they're saying and try to find common ground with them, then perhaps we can have a better dialogue. I've also learned it's important to try to get people away from crowds. Having discussions with people in the midst of a crowd, people feel like they're feeling very defensive, and they're not hearing what I'm saying. I've often said, I don't care if you agree with me or not, but I do care that after we've talked for 30 minutes, you understand what I'm saying. If you're not listening to me, you're going to get a distorted view of what I believe in. Because I believe that Jesus Christ is the sum of all knowledge, and that he can lead us into opportunities and conversations in which we can increase our understanding of the world that we live in, and we can learn from our enemy some of the blind spots that our friends would never give to us. So I've spent a lot of time studying law. I went to law school for a while, but I recognize that's not really what I want to do. I want to be a lawyer. I just want to be able to use the law in order to protect my rights. And I feel it's part of being a Christian. And one of the things that I've discovered is something in America called the common law. I had a conversation once with a police officer. He's a very hardened cop. Because I asked him, if you're walking down the street and you saw two men mugging a woman across the street, what would you do? And he said, knowing what I know about the law today, I would just keep walking. So I changed this. I said, well, let me change it just slightly. The woman across the street that is being mugged is your mother. Are you going to keep walking now? Well, of course not. And I said to him, that's common law. Under common law, you treat everybody as your mother and your brother and your sister. And doesn't that sound a lot like Jesus? That we would not treat anybody differently because of their country they came from, their color, their accent, and their voice. So we have a responsibility to contend against evil, regardless of who it is that's the victim. And I try to live that way. Right now in California, we've got a situation where people who are pro-life are being victimized, in my opinion, by our government. And we use out here something called the power of paper. And if government is doing something that's outside the law, they would, and the oath of office that every government official supposedly takes, then we send to that government agent directly affidavits that are notarized by a government official specifying exactly their responsibility to answer fully our objections, and that if they do not do so in a timely manner, everything in the affidavit can be used against them in every court in America. And this is revolutionary, certainly to a lot of government agents who are used to getting maybe some angry letters, but not affidavits in which they have to sign for, and then understand that they could be hauled into court someday and answer for their abuse of power. So I only learned this after many years of contending without knowledge. I've been to court more than most people have, because when I see something that's not right, I don't just pay the fine. I usually go to court and argue. Well, I found out that I've been arguing the wrong way. There's a right way and a wrong way. And the right way is to follow the law. Elisha, I was in a courtroom situation once, and I objected to something that the district attorney said. And the judge said, well, you're going to have to explain that. And I began to explain, and he said, Mr. Beck, I have to stop you because although you make some very good points, that's not why we're here today. You should have brought that up in a pre-trial motion. And light bulbs went on in my head. Yes, that's the problem that I've been doing. I'm coming into a courtroom and I'm assuming that I've got common law jurisdiction. I do not. I have something called statutory jurisdiction. It's kind of a made-up jurisdiction. When the United States was formed, we didn't have this kind of jurisdiction. Well, let me say this. We just got rid of it. By the Revolutionary War, we dealt with it. Thomas Jefferson, writing in the Declaration of Independence, wrote this. He, speaking of the king, as combined with others, speaking of Parliament and the colonial governors, he, combining with others, has subjected us to a jurisdiction foreign to our Constitution. Well, the Constitution he's talking about there is not the United States Constitution, which wasn't created until 11 years later. He was talking about the common law. He has combined with others to subject us to a jurisdiction foreign to our common law and unacknowledged by our laws, giving his assent to their acts of pretended legislation. Oh my goodness. Pretended legislation. I have learned that in this country, governments can pass statutes that are not laws. What? Yeah, it's true. Governments can pass statutes that are not constitutional, therefore they are not law. And they can be legal, they can be binding on the people if the people don't know how to counter it. We know how to counter it now. And the goal of this podcast and the many others that I've been doing, along with other people doing similar work, is to educate the people in this country. I don't know about Nigeria. I don't even know about England or Australia. I only know the law as it pertains to the United States. And in this country, we can object to statutory jurisdiction by way of pretrial motion. And we can also do it by sending notifications, notarized affidavits to offending parties. And I'm quick to point out that some of these offending parties are simply ignorant. They don't know the law. They might even be judges.
Tell you.
Most government officials.
Okay. Yeah, go on, please. Go on.
Most government officials that I've spoken with don't even know why they're in office. I went to my assemblywoman and I asked her, I said, according to the Declaration of Independence, what is the purpose of government? Oh, that's to protect the people. Well, no. I'm sure you've heard of these words, life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, period. Can you tell me what comes next? No, I don't know. Well, here's the word. These words follow. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men. That's your job description. When you go to the Capitol and pass laws, you make sure that they protect our rights. Don't try to protect us. We'll take care of that ourselves. We'll decide where our children should go to school. We'll decide what vaccinations they'll take. We'll decide all these things. You just make sure we have the rights protected. So when I went to my assemblywoman, I told her this. We had a nice conversation, but 6 months later, she's authoring a bill that would make my pastor a felon for simply giving counsel to someone who might have some questions about their sexuality, speaking from the Bible and what the Bible said. The statute that she was attempting to pass would have criminalized that. Why would it be criminalized? Well, because we know some people, when they get this kind of counseling, are so distraught by it that they commit suicide. I agree that if it's done poorly, it could lead to suicide in very, very rare cases. You do not legislate to exceptions, and you always legislate according to the protection of rights. My pastor's right, my right to speak to anybody about what the Bible says about certain things is a right that should be guaranteed and protected by all laws. Not trespass. by statute. So, nicely, we sent an affidavit to her and explained to her exactly what she was doing wrong and how it could be used against her. And it's got, look, if I'm wrong, all you have to do is send a rebuttal back to me by way of an affidavit also, and that'll settle things. But they never do. When we craft an affidavit based upon valid constitutional law, proper evidence, facts, and truth, it can't be rebutted. They've never rebutted any of ours. Now, I've been schooled by a couple that are in their 80s, and they have been doing this for 6 decades. And when I first met them, they said they had 10,000 victories. I thought that was probably a high exaggeration. But since I've known them for 6 years, I've got 5. I got 5 myself. And 2 of them have been in the courtroom, and 3 of them have been outside the courtroom. And I consider these victories for liberty. When anybody supports liberty and gets a victory, we all win. But to push back against government always tries to grow in power. And it's imperative that Christians understand their responsibility to God and to their fellow man to contend for the truth and to fight evil, even when it comes from government. It's our job description.
Right. Very true and correct. You've mentioned some things that are so helpful and educating, I tell you, Captain Kirk. And it's amazing to listen to you speak because your words are incredible. Okay, before we round up, I want you to quote, I'm not sure if I remember the name correctly. You mentioned the name. Is it Thomas Jefferson or I can't remember the name,
Thomas
you know?
Jefferson?
Yeah. I want you to quote his words again. You mentioned, I can't remember how you put it. Can you
Yeah.
quote what he said before the Constitution was created? Yeah.
This is in the Declaration of Independence. In my mind, the greatest document man has ever written. Because man didn't write the Bible. God used men to write it. But Jefferson wrote that he has combined with others to subject us to a jurisdiction foreign to our Constitution and unacknowledged by our laws, giving his assent to acts of pretended legislation. They're making all kinds of laws, should say statutes that are pretended legislation, and we don't have to follow them. We simply tell them they did something wrong, and we don't follow it. Our own Supreme Court has said if a statute is not constitutional, not only is it invalid, but you, the American people, have a responsibility not to obey it. The highest court in the United States has said, don't obey unjust law. And God's law is higher than that.
Yeah.
God said the same thing.
Said the same thing. It's amazing, I tell you. He's such a great God now. How wish the Bible can be the world's constitution. Instead of just reading constitution stuffs, if those folks can just make use of the laws, the precepts, the statutes of the Bible. So, Captain Kirk, it has been an interesting moment with you on the show. So to bring this to an end, what would you like to leave the audience with, like a final thought? And to those ones who would like to reach out to you, learn more about you, maybe you said some things that resonated with them, and they would like to learn more, maybe about the common law, the power of the paper, or things like that. How can that be possible?
I would direct them to a website, and when they go there, I have a free gift for anyone who goes there. It's affidavitsecrets.com/witnesses. Then we know that people that come through witnesses came through this program. So again, it's affidavitsecrets.com/witnesses. And they'll get a free gift there, and they'll also learn how they can be more involved and understand where we're going. This is a journey by a lot of people. I have people across the country that I talk to on a regular basis, and we're trying to formulate a program, a way of educating more Americans, especially Christians, through their responsibility before God to fight against evil.
That's a good one. So that's going to be the end of the show, Captain Kirk. Thank you for coming and thank you for sharing this incredible information with us. It means a whole lot. Thank you.
You're so welcome, and thank you for having me here.